Hi, everybody, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
And today we're going to be looking at our topic-based writing for this month. It's a writing unit about someone we had the wrong first impression of. Is this something that's happened to you much? In fact, I was going to ask, can we remember our first impression of each other? So many years ago.
第一次见面的印象。That was a long time ago, Pat.
It is. It's going back a long way in my memory.
More than 5 years ago.
At least 5 years, maybe more.
So the first impression I had of you, I think, I thought you were a very nice guy.
Okay.
Gentle and polite.
Okay, so you did have the wrong first impression of me.
No, I think it was the right one.
I'm a terrible person. First impression of Elsie. Bubbly, kind of light-hearted, fun teacher.
Oh.
I guess. Is that right?
Kind of.
Kind of. Yeah.
Maybe I've changed too.
Yeah, I mean, everything kind of goes deeper than that first impression.
Right.
But that's the idea here. We're talking not just about what we think when we first meet someone, but what can happen sometimes when you get it seriously wrong. Either you make an error in judgment, which is mostly the case, or maybe you just catch that person in the wrong kind of situation. We're kind of looking at both in our writing samples, but let's get into the actual topic and instructions. Always important to read these so you know what you have to do and how you want to do it. So the instructions are, write an essay about a person you had a wrong first impression of. Now, what's good about these instructions is they make it clear what's in each paragraph. In the first paragraph, you should describe who this person is, what they look like, how they behaved, and what your first impression of them was. In the second paragraph, you should further describe the real side of this person, how you found it out, how you reacted to it. So the essay should be at least 120 words in length and contain, of course, these two paragraphs.
OK, 今天的提示呢，我们要仔细看哦。提示说的是呢，我们对一个人的评价，往往取决于这个人在我们心中所留下的第一印象。不过第一印象无法完整呈现一个人的全貌。有些时候呢，我们事后才发现自己因为错误的第一印象而误会了他人。所以要请你描述一位由错误的第一印象而被你误判的人。那第一段，请你描述这个人，他的言行与你对这个人的第一印象。第二段再说明这个人实际的面貌跟这个发现对你的影响。那文章一样需要至少120个单词，而且必须分段。
Okay, so this article or this particular writing also helps us make a few decisions about how we'll write it. This is about a personal experience, therefore you will be using first person. I did this, I felt this, and so on. You don't need to create another character. It's about you. And this is a past experience, so therefore you will use past tense. Maybe there'll be some perfect tenses, present perfect, past perfect, but you're not going to be writing in present tense here.
OK, 所以呢，这是一个关于你自己的个人经验，所以当然要用第一人称。那时态呢，我们选用过去式，因为是你过去对他的印象影响了整件事情，所以要注意第一人称还有过去式的使用。
And another thing to remember is that if this hasn't happened to you, if you can't think of a real experience, just make it up. Even if your story is fake, you can follow the same approach that we're going to explain and come up with a good piece of creative writing.
没错，假如呢你忘记了这个第一印象，或是你根本没有这样的经验，那就用掰的没有关系，只要不要露出破绽就好。
All right then, let's develop our approach and start kind of thinking about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
好，我们这边呢，一样要写的是叙述文。那什么是叙述文呢？叙述文呢，它是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常常出现在大考的作文题目当中。常见的类型有：第一种，描述经验或事件；第二种，描述物品；第三种，描述人物。那这一次呢，我们这个单元要叙述的是你由于错误的第一印象而误判的人，那就是属于对人物的叙述。
So this is a narrative kind of writing. Narrative is a very common style. It definitely turns up on the exams that you'll take a lot. And of the different types of narrative, the one we're looking at is describing an experience or events. Obviously, it's a narrative about character, what you thought versus what was real, how you felt as the process, happened, how you felt at first, how you felt at the end. And of course, we're going to need our normal three things, as in any narrative: a beginning, a body or a middle, and an end or conclusion. The introduction will get us started on the topic, the body will tell the story, and the conclusion wraps it up, often with maybe what you learned from the experience.
没错，所以呢，英文作文的架构一样，我们分为引言 introduction、文章主体 body， 还有就是结论 conclusion。那本篇描述人物的叙述文也是以此架构发展的。Introduction 它是文章的引言，说明书写此篇文章的动机。全文的主旨句 thesis statement 常在第一段点出来哦。那在描述人物的文章当中introduction 可以有以下几种方式。第一个，直接说明你要描述的对象是谁。第二个，简单说明你对这个人的看法或是印象。
Okay, so as with any introduction, we don't want to spend too long on it. A couple of sentences will be fine to get this topic in the reader's mind. And to do this, we need to introduce the person we're talking about nice and early. So in our basic sample, we see, I really made a mistake in my first impression of my high school classmate James. So there we know when this happened, who it was, and we've got this topic idea, a mistaken first impression. Simple, clear, very good writing. The advanced sample uses a quote to kind of bring it in. I'd often heard the old saying, never judge a book by its cover, but not until the last semester of junior high school did I truly understand it. So that's setting up the idea. And then in the second sentence, my class that year was made up of 28 students, and the most forgettable among them was Anthony. So the second sentence of this two-sentence introduction brings in our person, and the first introduces the overall topic.
那接下来呢，我们要到 body 的部分，那就是文章的主体咯。必须要叙述许多相关的细节，也就是 supporting details。细节必须和主题相关，而且要使主题更生动，让人家印象深刻，并且根据本篇的提示，要将所需要的资讯写进去对应的段落当中。所以提示要你写什么，你就要去写什么哦。
So our body is quite clearly explained in the instructions. We describe our first impression, their appearance, their personality, how this made us feel, and the supporting details are things like why this person made us feel good or bad. Was this person fun to be with or not? Why? Why was this person seeming mean or unfriendly? So we're talking about what the person did, how they acted. And then the second bit is just the story, how you find out your first impression was wrong, what this person did or didn't do, and how it all changed.
那再来呢，我们就要看到 conclusion， 那就是文章的结论，再一次去强调这个人物和主题的关系对你有什么样的影响。那这种方式的结论呢，可以让文章完整，而且也可以呼应第一段，所以我们说的前后呼应是很重要的。
The conclusion to this piece will be the lesson you, the writer, learned, and whatever it's a good first impression or a bad one, the lesson will be don't always believe first impressions. That's what it's likely to be, no matter how you write it. So now let's move on to brainstorming and getting these personal details that we'll need to fill out the story.
好，我们这次的 brainstorming 我们要做的是呢，要注意本次写作必须要着重在你对被描写人物的第一印象，好，这是我们一直强调的部分，以及你事后发现这个人物真实言行之间的差异，前后的对比越明显，该人物的形象就越历历在目，也就能达到人物描写的目的。所以你可以先写下来，这个人是谁，你对他的第一印象是什么，接下来你怎么样发现他的转变。
So there are lots of ways to brainstorm these ideas, but they're pretty much all focused around those question words: who, when, where, what, why, and how. Once you answer these questions, then you'll have the information you need to write our story. Now, if you look in our magazine, we'll see we've done it by putting the person we have a wrong impression of in the middle, and then we've got two branches going off. On one side, we have the first impression, and on the other side, we have the truth. And this is going to present us with a set of contrasts that we will kind of mix and match. So the questions will be, who is this story about? It's obviously you. Who's the other person? When did you meet them? What was your first impression? And the supporting details, how did they make the impression? And then you need to think, what event led to the change? How do you feel about those and those changes and what happened at the time, but also later? And of course, what lesson did you learn?
是的，所以我们也可以利用5个 WH 加上一个 how 来写出问题，接着你就去回答这些问题，这样子呢，资讯就会相当的清楚明白。
Okay, so we fill in some of the details. We know we've got who the other person is, James. The brainstorming picture we've got is really concentrating on the personality of this person. First impression, they are kind and sincere. They're a good listener. They're sympathetic. They're good at keeping secrets. But what about the bad impression, Elsie?
OK, 所以你看到下方他说 What I found out later 我之后发现 Number 1, he revealed my secrets 他把我的秘密透露出来了 He laughed about them 还嘲笑我的秘密 He said it wasn't a big deal 他说这又没什么大不了的最后 He only cared about himself What a terrible person
Indeed, yeah. The first 3 in that list are the things that James did, and number 4 is kind of the conclusion that the writer, that you, draw about James from these actions. At that point, you can then do the conclusion, I will not trust first impressions. Maybe I will be a bit more careful about who I trust with my secrets. So that's our information. We've got a few more details you can add. Who were they? We know it's a high school classmate. When did you meet them? In high school, that kind of thing. So let's put this into a more solid outline in the order of sentences. Now, we don't need full, complete sentences here. We don't need to put transitions in them. We're just putting together the overall structure that we'll fill out later. So, paragraph 1, the topic sentence, I had a wrong impression of my high school classmate James. That clearly says what the topic's about. And then we've got those sentences from the first part of the brainstorm that show what the supporting details are for the wrong impression. He seems to be a nice and sincere person. He always gave his full attention when I talked to him. He was also good at expressing sympathy. So that's the things that James did. And the first kind of mini conclusion is, I felt I could trust him with my secrets.
OK, 但是呢我们主题句2有一个 however 出现，因为要写出前后你印象跟这个人真实状况的转变，所以 however I overheard James talking with some other students later 这件事情是他听到 James 跟别的人在说话，然后说了什么 He revealed my secrets to everyone. He laughed about them. When I talked to him, he said it wasn't a big deal. I realized he only cared about himself. 最后一个要特别注意哦，他因为这件事情而有的这个结论，而有的这个处理办法 I stopped being friends with him. 我不再跟他当朋友了。那有了第一段和第二段的 outline 之后，我们就需要 conclusion 结论句的部分。这边的结论句是呢 This experience has made me more careful about trusting first impressions. 这次的经验让我变得对一个人的第一印象更加小心。
So the topic sentence for this one introduces the event that saw that you'd made a wrong first impression. The first 2 or 3 supporting details are the events. What did he do? What happened? So that's A, B, and C kind of covered there. D and E kind of talk about the results of finding out this first impression. So they maybe happen only a little bit later than the actual events. Maybe they happen quite a bit later. I realized he only cared about himself. I stopped being friends with him. And the conclusion is maybe what happens to the writer a bit later when he's had time or she's had time to process these events, to think about things and decide this is what I've learned. It was a horrible experience, but I'm going to come out of it and I won't make that same mistake again. So that's our basic outline. We've got a bunch of simple sentences there. They don't quite fit together. We'll need a bit more detail. We'll need transition sentences and so on. And we'll add these when we turn these kind of short sentences into a full essay. And make sure you follow this kind of logical, sensible time structure. Don't leave out any details that are important to the story, and so on. Now, it's easy to include a little too much information that may not be necessarily related to the point you want to get across. Talking about what James looked like, maybe it's quite interesting information, but how someone looks isn't always related to how they act. Maybe the way they looked helped make you have a wrong first impression. If that's the case, then it's important. If their appearance has nothing to do with how they act, we don't need it. Cut it out. So this kind of outline, this is an important step because it keeps your writing kind of to the point. You can see where this information is not important. I will cut it out. Do it in your outline. Or maybe you'll find, I need some more information to explain this point here. And so doing an outline helps you kind of find the gaps and find where your outline fits and where it doesn't.
没错，所以呢，你先写出精简的 outline， 你也可以先聚焦于这个人的，比如说个性，或者是如果跟外表有相关的话，你也可以把外表带进来，但如果不相关呢，就不要谈到外表。那等到呢，在写整篇作文的时候，你再去增添细节，这样子才不会让你的内容太过于繁琐。
Okay, we're going to take a very short break now, and when we come back, we'll look through our two samples in this unit, talk a bit about how they're structured, and look at some of the phrases, grammar, words, and so on that are used. Welcome back, everyone. So we've talked about how we can construct some brainstorming ideas and a more solid outline for our two samples. Let's look at how the final samples turned out. We'll start with the basic sample. I really made a mistake in my first impression of my high school classmate James. On the surface, he seemed a kind, friendly, and sincere person. He always gave me his full attention when I talked to him, which made him really easy to talk to. James was great at expressing sympathy, and this led me to feel I could tell him anything. Over time, I told him many of my secrets, including which girl I had a crush on. However, a few months later, I overheard James talking with some other students. James was revealing my crush to everyone. What's worse, he was laughing about it. When I confronted him about it later, he said it wasn't a big deal. This showed me that he only cared about himself. I stopped being friends with him after that, and the experience has made me more careful about trusting first impressions. Okay, so we've seen there how our basic outline that we came up with fits together to make a long one. We've got these transition phrases over time in the first paragraph, which explains this is a slow process. The writer doesn't immediately tell James everything, but over time he comes to trust him more. Then we've got things like however. So that's going to signal a contrast to start the second paragraph. And what's worse, to show that laughing about the secrets, this crush, was even worse than telling people about it in the first place. So we've got a few other words to look at here as well. We think that, or the writer thinks that James is a sincere person. The word sincere means that if you're sincere, you're honest, you're genuine. What you see is what you get. A person who is sincere doesn't hide things from you. They don't hide who they really are. They don't say one thing but really think another. They're pretty much honest, truthful, straightforward.
OK， 所以呢，他一开始形容这个人是用 sincere 这个字，代表他很真诚、很真实，不隐藏。那再来呢，我们看到这个人啊，他也富有同情心，我们用的是 sympathy 这个字。那形容词呢，你在 brainstorming 的地方，你会看到他用的是 sympathetic， 那就是富有同情心的。
Yeah, sympathetic is the adjective form, and sympathy is the idea of feeling pity and sorry for other people's bad times. You hear about a story and you kind of feel bad for them. You want to say, oh, I understand. I've similar things happened before. Or you say, that's really terrible. I can understand why you're upset. Is there anything I can do? That is expressing sympathy, showing that you feel another person's pain and you can understand why they're upset. Instead of just going, so what? That didn't happen to me. Why should I care? Now, the secret, the big thing this story hinges on is which girl that the writer has a crush on. Now, this word crush, it's normally a noun. You would say my crush to talk about a person. I have a crush on somebody. That explains how you feel. And what we're talking here is kind of teenage love, adolescent love. It's not like real, like deep, true love that you might have between a husband and wife or that sort of thing. It's that feeling that you get when you're in high school and there's a girl or a boy. You think, oh, I really like them. They're so handsome. They're so cool. You think about them a lot. It's really mostly surface stuff because you don't know them properly, but you do kind of have special feelings for that person and you kind of want to be around them, but you're probably terrified of telling them about it.
OK， 所以就像是我们中文说的暗恋某人，所以 crush 它可以当作那个人，好，代表你喜欢的那个人，或者是呢搭配 have a crush on somebody， 代表你暗恋他，喜欢他。那再来呢，还有一个很重要的动词呢是 confront。Right,
to confront somebody, which is what our person did. He went to confront James. To confront someone is to have a face-to-face meeting and conversation with someone to deal with some kind of problem or issue between them. Often you go to them and say, I know what you did. This is a problem. We need to sort it out. Or maybe you've kind of... Usually you're revealing that you know something and this problem is not too much of a secret, but you want to solve it, and it often ends in an argument, maybe even a fight. To confront someone is a slightly aggressive thing to do.
OK， 那我们如果要说呢，跟某人对质某事的话，可以说 confront somebody about the problem。所以我们在 basic sample 里面看到 when I confronted him about it later。好，所以你会看到 confront him about it。动词加上受词 him， 再接上介系词 about， 再加上那件事情。
Okay, so that's our basic sample. Let's now take a look at our advanced sample and see how we can make a kind of more complicated, detailed story out of it. So, advanced sample. I'd often heard the old saying, never judge a book by its cover. But not until the last semester of junior high school did I truly understand it. My class that year was made up of 28 students, and the most forgettable among them was Anthony. His hair and eyes were both a muddy brown, and unlike many of our classmates, he wore his uniform exactly according to the rules, with nothing customized or unique. One day, we were paired for a project, and I rolled my eyes. I didn't want to work with this dull, nondescript boy. Anthony quietly invited me to his house that afternoon to begin work. The walk there was excruciating, as neither of us had anything to say. We'd been working for 2 hours when he suggested taking a break. We walked out to get some tea and ran into his friends, who were hanging out in the nearby park. Anthony's face lit up and he became like a different person upon seeing them. In the presence of his friends, he was comfortable yet animated. He joked around and even did some excellent dance moves. I was amazed. When we went back to his house, we were both more relaxed, which made it easier to connect. If I'd never seen him so loose and free in his friends' company, I'd never have thought to make friends with him myself. Fortunately, I did. And he's now one of the most fun and genuine people in my life.So here we've got a different kind of contrast. We have the writer meeting somebody who just seems so boring, so ordinary, nothing special. But when he meets him again or encounters him or spends time with him in a different situation, we kind of find something different about Anthony. He's not dull, he's not boring.Maybe he was just shy and not too good around new people, but once he gets to know someone, he really opens up. So that's the first impression. Firstly, this guy's so dull. Secondly, hey, he's kind of cool.OK,
所以呢，我们看到很多的形容词都来形容这个人有多无聊，他的第一印象对他是如此。所以像是 nondescript 这个形容词代表平淡无奇的，还有就是他跟他走路回家的路上，他用到excruciating 也就是非常极其痛苦的。
Right. Nondescript is used to it's basically saying this thing is difficult to describe because it's so typical, it's so boring, it's just no different from anything else. So a nondescript boy, I mean, we say his hair is muddy brown, kind of a boring color. His eyes are a muddy brown. There's nothing special about them. This person is kind of so ordinary, it's almost like he is invisible. And he wears his uniform just like the rules say. It's not customized. Customized means it's kind of made or adapted with a person in mind. You could customize something by putting your own badges or adding a bit of color or wearing cool trainers or a little bit of jewelry or something to make it a bit different and unique to you. But no, this guy just, you could pass him on the street, you'd forget about him immediately, you wouldn't remember his face. And that made the walk home excruciating.Which means extremely painful, or in this case, awkward. It's just like, I don't know what to say. How can I talk with him? I feel so bad that we're quiet around each other.
再来呢，你会看到它的转变，所以啊，在这个 advanced sample 下半部的位置，你会看到他说，其实 he was comfortable yet animated. Animated 这个形容词呢，代表它是充满活力的，所以它不是他所看到的那个样子，这么样的无聊，它其实充满活力。
Right. Animated means full of life and energy. He's very different. He's not just kind of this boring, dull, quiet boy. We also say he was loose and free. We often say if someone is around strangers or uncomfortable, we say they tighten up. It's almost like they conceal themselves. They don't open their mouth. They don't let any of their true feelings out. But around friends, we say they loosen up. Their real personality comes out. They show their thoughts, their feelings. They don't act so shy or try to hide anything about who they really are. So that's how we can kind of show that first impressions don't really work in two different ways. A good impression can be really bad, or you might think this person's boring, but they turn out to be cool.And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening, everybody. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.